To introduce to you the panel members for the sessions of today on the future of the internet, or the internet of the future, and specifically the metaverse. The panel members are Stefan Almond, which is the Director of Technology and Innovation at the ICO, or the Information Commission's Office in the UK. I have also the honor of introducing Stefano Fratta, who is the Privacy Policy Director at Meta, and Jan Lowijs, who is Risk Advisory Director at Deloitte, also here in Amsterdam. We're practically neighbors. And we are still missing one panel member, which we obviously hope will still join us, which is Ultan O'Carroll, the Deputy Commissioner of the Data Protection Commission of Ireland. So we hope that he will log in a moment. So, today's session is about the Internet of the future. And during this panel discussion, we will focus on the metaverse, its possibilities, its challenges. And although debated whether it is the correct source of the name metaverse or the term metaverse, it is the first created by the author Neil Stephenson in its novel Snow Crash in 1992 already. And I was quite surprised about that 1992. In the book, the protagonist hero enters a virtual reality called Metaverse as an escape from his physical reality, living in a shabby shipping container. Will the metaverse change the internet as we currently know it? Because we will become part of the internet, we will integrate as our avatars in the digital space, or will it change reality as we know it? Because we will no longer have, we will have a limited physical footprint, but we will more and more have a digital footprint. So those questions are the core of the panel of today. And I start off with the first question I have for my honored panel members, which is, what is the metaverse? For those out there which still think, what do I need to understand with the term metaverse? And what will the internet of the future look like? Over to you, Stefana, to pick up that first interesting question.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicole, and good morning to everybody, and thank you for organizing this great event. Look, I thought that instead of me trying to explain what is that metaverse, I thought I would bring like a short 2-minute video to give everybody like an introduction on Meta's vision for the metaverse. So let's play the video now, please.
The basic story of technology in our lifetimes is how it's given us the power to express ourselves and experience the world with ever greater richness. We've gone from desktop to web to phones, from text to photos to video, but this isn't the end of the line. The next platform and medium will be even more immersive, an embodied internet where you're in the experience, not just looking at it. And we call this the metaverse. Teleporting around the metaverse is going to be like clicking a link on the internet. It's an open standard. Avatars will be as common as profile pictures today, but instead of a static image, they're going to be living 3D representations of you.
In the metaverse, learning won't feel anything like the way we've learned before. With a headset or glasses, you'll be able to pull up schematics you're studying, or maybe even the service manual for a vehicle you're learning to repair. But in order to get there, we're going to need to help build the skill sets of the people who build these experiences. We're setting aside $150 million to train the next generation of creators.
Creators are really leading the way here, and we're doing everything we can to support them with our know-how, with our resources, and of course, with tools.
We're also introducing a new office space in Horizon Home for when you want your perfect workspace to do some focused work or just cross a few things off your to-do list. In the metaverse, your devices won't be the focal point of your attention anymore. Instead of getting in the way, they're going to give you a sense of presence in the new experiences that you're having and the people who you're with. And these are some of the basic concepts for the metaverse. And while this may sound like science fiction, we're starting to see a lot of these technologies coming together. I believe the metaverse is the next chapter for the internet. And it's the next chapter for our company too. From now on, we're going to be metaverse first, not Facebook first. And as our new brand starts showing up in our products, I hope that people come to know the Meta brand and the future that we stand for.
Thank you. So look, I think you've seen from the video like some of the major element of the metaverse. The metaverse basically is the next evolution in social technology and is the successor to the mobile internet that we are experiencing today. If you think of it in the same way we've gone from desktop to web to mobile, in the same way we have moved from text to photos to videos, now we're bringing a new chapter, and every new chapter comes with new ideas and new challenges, new risks, and new disruptions, and that is what we're going to be dealing with in the coming years. The metaverse, as you've seen from the video, is basically a set of digital spaces, including 3D experiences, that are accessible across AR, VR, accessible across like PC, but also mobile devices and games console. All these spaces are or will be interconnected so that we can easily move between them. The main characteristic of the metaverse is the sense of presence. It's like the embodied internet, the way we call it like internally. The metaverse is going to be about bringing presence to life. It will be about like leaving the internet rather than looking at the internet, and that's why avatars are going to play like a major role in the way we're going to experience the internet going forward. And they're going to be the real themselves that we want to have and want to show to the rest of the community when we do. The other very critical thing that I probably set aside the metaverse for from some of the experience that we have today is that the metaverse is going to be like a collaborative exercise. The metaverse is not going to be owned or built or run by any one company. That is not the vision. They're going to be like creators, developers, companies, stakeholders, policymakers from every topic, from every sectors. They're all going to be contributing to the creation of the metaverse. The metaverse, in our vision, is and will continue to be like an open ecosystem where Meta will be just one of the many contributors. And basically, our main role, if you want, in the creation of the metaverse is going to be to accelerate the development of these technologies, to accelerate the development of social platforms and creative tools that bring people together. But we're going to be just one of the many players in this story. So look, if you think of it, the metaverse is clearly like a journey. It's a journey to a new way of working, a new way of entertainment, a new way of cooperating, a new way of living together. So the big question is like, where are we on this journey now? And as you see from the video, basically, we're at the very start of it. We're at the very start of the journey. This is not going to happen overnight. Many of the products that you have seen in the video, many of the products that will form and build the metaverse going forward will be only really realized or fully realized or available like in the next 10 or 15 years. This is like, especially if you think of it from a policy point of view, like this is like a great thing because it gives us time to ask ourselves like the difficult questions on how we build it, how our society can enjoy and fully enjoy all the opportunity provided by the metaverse. It's a unique opportunity that we have now that we basically, if we start the right discussion now, we have the option to actually build the policy while we build the technology. That is really just once in a lifetime opportunity, if you want, to be able to develop the right policy answers while we developed the technology of the future. So look, in line with the DNA of our company, most of the work that we're doing now is based on delivering social experiences. We mostly focus on building the metaverse in three big areas. The first one being gaming and immersive content. The second being social virtual reality, including Horizon Worlds. And the third one, and probably like one of the most important, is the future of education, work, and productivity. These are the three main axes of the construction of the metaverse for the future, as far as Facebook Meta is concerned, and you will see a lot more coming from us in the near future. Let me finish this first introduction, if you want, to the metaverse, to a last thought or last question. Is like, why should we be in the metaverse? Why is this relevant to all of us? And I think the first answer that comes to mind is that first, nothing beats being together, like being physically together. But if you cannot be physically together, you cannot be together in person, then the metaverse is going to be the way for us to actually be even closer than in-person connection in comparison to what we have today. The metaverse will makes it extremely easy to share experiences. It's immersive, it's engaging, it will unlock new opportunities for people and communities to get together. The metaverse breaks down geographic barriers, financial barriers, and that will get people closer together. And finally, the metaverse opens up new creative and economic opportunities. By allowing people to connect in new ways, it will reduce distances, it will reduce like the link between location and opportunity. It will just unlock the ability of millions of people to create new work, new economic opportunity. And so I think these are like the main reason why we want to be in the metaverse. So I think, Nicole, this was like my quick intro to the metaverse in less than 5 minutes. Back to you.
Thank you, Stefano, and thank you for that very clear introduction. You did challenge me on some topics you mentioned. You talked yourself about the challenges of the metaverse and also having the right discussion. I do think it's already interesting to know from you directly, if you feel free, to talk about what do you see as the challenges of the metaverse from a meta perspective.
I think in terms of challenges, what we're mostly looking at is working on equity and inclusion. I think that will be the first one that comes to mind, and to say how can we actually use this technology to solve some of the challenges that we have today. Think about, for instance, like breaking language barriers. Like today, we have difficulties generated by the language barriers that we have that technology in the metaverse can allow us to actually solve and reduce. Think of speech translation. Think of the ability to give access to online services based on speech translation. That would be like an amazing thing. Think about the making technology universally accessible. Like the metaverse will need to be accessible to everybody if we want to make it happen, and that is a challenge in itself, because like the metaverse is based on very, very sophisticated technology, is based on devices that are actually pretty expensive. And so if you want, like the one of the main priority for Meta is to make sure that these devices are available to the largest amount of people. At the same time, like another challenge that comes with the metaverse is the connectivity. Like metaverse, like you cannot have a metaverse if people do not have the right connectivity tools. And that's why another of the major investments that Meta is doing is around building connectivity in the world, like bringing subsea cable to Africa, for instance, so that connectivity in those part of the world can improve and can then support like a metaverse vision going forward. Another challenge is actually how do you bring the right talent to build the metaverse? The metaverse needs to be universal, needs to be inclusive, and therefore you need to be able to attract talent from across the world, to have the right people representing different views, different opinion, different mentalities in building this new internet that we want to see in the future. Another aspect that we're focusing on, and is also very relevant when it comes to challenges like safety, integrity. Like metaverse will need controls, systems, oversight to create a safe environment. That is something that is clear. That is one of Meta's priority going forward. We want everybody to feel like they are in control of their experience when they're in the metaverse, and they're safe in our platform, in the same way as we want everybody to feel safe in our Facebook platform or Instagram platform or WhatsApp platform today. So like in Quest, which is basically our AR VR tool, we already offer the ability to people to report conduct that is not appropriate. We are building in social apps like Horizon or Vanis, we're building like safe zones where people can basically take a break from the surrounding if they feel that they're not comfortable with the people they're interacting with or the situation in which they are. So like these are all issues that we need to develop. And that's why I was saying before, like, there are challenges that come with the metaverse. There are like billions of opportunities. And the great advantage that we have is that we're starting early to address them. And as a society, we can find a shared solution for all of these problems while we build the technology.
Thank you, Stefano, for this for this elaboration. Just one very practical question. For entering the metaverse, do I have to wear like a virtual reality glasses the whole time, or is that going to be developed in time that we get very funky new light-weighted glasses? How will that develop?
Yeah, you've seen. I think if you saw the video, what we were saying is that this is like a vision of what is going to happen in the next 10, 15 years. And I think that the metaverse will be accessible from different platforms. Like, will be accessible from the desktop, or from your mobile, or from like a gaming console, or from AR VR glasses. Like, there's going to be like many different shades of gray, if you want, and many different ways to have access to this experience. Like, the important thing in the vision is that all these experiences are going to be like connected. That's why like interoperability is one of the major elements of this vision. But the idea is that everybody will have access to some part of the metaverse, if you want, or like an experience of the metaverse. And clearly the experience will depend very much on whether you are accessing it on a 2D device, or like a 3D device, or and so on. But the idea is that it should be universally accessible with whatever technology is available to you at the moment.
Thank you for that. You comfort me a little bit that I don't have to wear like these big, heavy glasses the whole time. Just to maybe summarize it, and I go over to Jan for this question. Just to summarize it, what is in your view typical about the metaverse when you compare it to the internet as we know it today? Could you pick up that question?
Yeah, happy to do so, Nicole, and good morning to you all. There is many things that's overlapping actually with the internet as we know it today. That's the interconnectivity that Stefano also spoke about, and that's the fact that you can go from one place to another place, and that it's not just this one thing, but that these are various instances of metaverses that are connected to each other. If you like. And so I think that is also the way we know the internet today, that we can go from website to website, if you like, from social media platform to online shops, etc., etc. What is different, if I've seen various metaverses that are being built at the moment, is that the experience, Nicole, you spoke about the big goggles. Yes, sometimes, but you can also access them for instance, from your laptop. And what is different is that you see other people interacting in that space as well. I think it's well put, that interaction between people and seeing others and finding others is a large part of what will be different from the current internet. For instance, take something like an online shop, a very basic one, a bookstore, a clothing store, or whatever. If you go there now, you are browsing through lists and lists of things on pictures and so on, and then selecting something, going to checkout, and that's about it. From examples of metaverses that I've seen, you can also walk into a shop in a VR, in a virtual reality environment, see actually the things as you would see them in a physical shop, see other people shopping there as well, interacting with the staff of the shop, and actually try on digitally on your own on your own avatar, some things that you pick up from a clothing rack there, put it on, see how it looks, buy it, and actually get it physically shipped to you in that way. So I think it's that interactivity and that connectivity to others, and the interaction with others, and how you deal with things that are virtual but can become physical in your hands at a certain point in time. I think that's one of the real differences there, Nicole, between the current internet and the metaverse, if you like.
Thank you, Jan, for also that explanation, very clear. And I want to shift over now to the two panel members, which are all working at the regulators. So we've seen that Ultan has joined us now. So a very warm welcome to Ultan this morning, as also one of my panel members. And I want to direct this first question about the regulatory framework around the metaverse. And it's still all in development. But I do already want to start, the talk about it. What are the major concerns when you look from a privacy and not maybe a specific data protection, but a more broader perspective from the regulator's point of view when looking at the metaverse? What are your worries? What keeps you awake as a regulator thinking, the metaverse is coming at night? So Stefan, over to you.
Thank you. Well, look, I want to start by just doing a little bit of a quick thought experiment with you. And I just want you to think about what you've done in the last 24 hours and just imagine if for whatever period, every possible data point was being collected. Your emotions as you're engaging with your friends, your stress levels in the workplace, every place that you're visiting and every person that you're talking to. And imagine if those data were being collected or shared without your full knowledge, if they were perhaps being used to make unfair decisions about you or to market products and services towards you based on your personal state at a given time, or if bad actors could hack into those data or impersonate you and find out intimate details about you. And imagine if you're interacting with that universe as a child or another vulnerable citizen. What protections would you be wanting the privacy regulators to be putting in place? The great news from my perspective is that we're just at the outset of building the metaverse, and we have the opportunity to get it right. We have an opportunity to hardwire data protection into the design of the metaverse. But if we're going to do so, we need to start learning the privacy lessons from today's internet. Lots of those privacy concerns that I outlined are not necessarily novel. Issues like opaque collection of personal data for targeted advertising or the risks of information theft are present in today's internet. But what is novel about the metaverse is the potential type, scale, granularity of the information that's being collected. For example, if AR or VR is the conduit to the metaverse, then very intimate, largely sort of biometric data can be processed, including real-time monitoring of your facial expressions, vocal inflections, or vital signs. And that, combined with the processing power of artificial intelligence can mean that your emotional state or your cognitive load can be assessed, creating new forms of inferred, very intimate personal information. And so we really need to think about this and get it right when we're thinking about, particularly as we're thinking about how the metaverse technologies is rolled out beyond some of the social or entertainment use cases towards things like education or the workplace. We need to think about how are educational authorities, employers, the government going to be able to access people's previously inaccessible highly personal data. The fact of the metaverse is that in order for it to work, our individual digital footprints have to grow. There has to be a lot more data about us to make it work. And we need to think about how we're going to protect those data through it. We need to think particularly about how we're going to do that for some of the most vulnerable audiences. If you think about the sort of the social gaming environments, children are going to be a core audience of any metaverse environment. So how do we make sure that they have the right experience that's appropriate for a child? How are we going to make sure that there are the right parental controls or age verification methods for them? And we're going to have to think about how we're going to tackle those kind of original challenges that come from the current internet around the processing of personal information for targeted advertising and the security of user information, particularly where people can be impersonated and targeted in different ways. So there's a lot that we need to think about, but I am going to end with that positive note. And we've got a real opportunity if firms like Meta, who are looking to shape how the metaverse evolves, really lean in and think, actually, what is a privacy first metaverse? What does that look like? And I'd really love to hear their thoughts on that.
Thank you, Stefan, for, I think, a very clear answer. And I certainly found it really interesting as a data protection lawyer to hear you elaborate on your concerns about the metaverse. Then I go over to Ultan, or does anybody of the panel want to review Stefan's concerns? Jan or Stefano, just shout out or let me know if you want to respond to that. And otherwise, we go. Stefano, please go ahead.
I just make like a quick comment now, and then we can take it later. Like Stephen was just saying now, like how can we build a metaverse that is like privacy first? And I think this is the work that is ongoing at the moment. But I just wanted to give like a quick example. Like it is true that the metaverse, as fundamentally any technology based on AR VR, is definitely like data intensive. But there are ways you can actually mitigate the privacy impact of data intensive technology. Think of, for instance, and I'll give you just like a very quick example of the sensors that we use in Quest to actually monitor the way you use hands, like, to control, to play games and so on. That data is definitely data intensive. If a user chooses to actually enable hand tracking, then there is hand tracking going on all the time. But then at the same time, the movement data that we collect is limited to what is needed to deliver the experience. It is stored on device and is erased immediately as soon as, basically it is erased and written over continuously, and so that the user can get the experience that he wants, but there is no excessive collection of data. So I would say, I just want to give this example to say, it is true that we have this tension between, on one hand, the need to have a lot of data to make sure that the user has the experience that he wants to, and on the other hand, like the privacy first approach. But the reality is showing that, like, by working on it, you can find solutions that actually optimize the user experience and at the same time protect privacy. Just want to say that.
Thanks, Stefano. And I do have a question also in the chat. I actually got two, but this is, I think, a good moment to ask one question, which is actually in line with, I think, some of the concerns, and it's about the protection of health data. And the question is how health data is to be protected given AI and healthcare. Telemedicine is a big step forward in healthcare innovation. And I think the telemedicine then divided to the metaverse, and the fact that then health data is probably going to be exchanged also possibly in the metaverse, because the only fact that your avatar is labeled as a patient, for instance, just imagining here, is that something you, Stefano, can share your thoughts about? Is that something already in a phase which is taken in consideration in the development, that special categories data?
I mean, it is definitely one of the issue that you have to take into account. The only thing I would say now is that for me, at the moment, at least in the way we are building the products and looking at the products, I think the answer that we have are the same answer that are valid today under GDPR. So, like, I would say that especially when it comes to health data, like the regime that we have in the GDPR and the let's say the safety and the restrictions attached to the way you process that data in the GDPR would apply, obviously, like in the metaverse, and that is basically the line of working that we have at the moment.
Okay, thank you for that. I think that's very interesting as well to see, and to see that the GDPR actually that works as a basic framework will also work in the metaverse. I go over to Ultan then to answer the next question, which is also a regulatory perspective. And I think I'm going to combine the two questions maybe, and that is looking at the current regulatory framework and whether you believe that it is still apt for the metaverse, but also looking at the future, like the Digital Services Act, the Digital Markets Act, the AI Act, all these new legislative, at least in Europe, coming and we're not even globally. Will they, are they apt for the metaverse, or is there a gap? Is something maybe from a regulatory perspective missing, or is there too much? So over to you, Ultan.
Thanks, Nicole. That's a very hard question, I think, because first of all, we don't really know what the metaverse is at this point or what it's going to be. I mean, as Stefano has said, we're very early days and things are being developed. Things are being tried out. There are different kinds of platforms. There are issues we already know about that are hard nuts to crack: interoperability, security, all those things that exist at the moment. And from my perspective, I suppose a lot of the questions that come up are very basic ones, and the ones that we deal with at the moment, and things that Stephen has referenced there as well. So, as with any issue that comes towards us, and it's issues that come to us as regulators, not the happy times. We get involved when things go wrong or when we try and prevent things from going wrong. The issues are to do with basics. What personal data is collected? Is the data that's collected personal in the first place? And that applies to generated and inferred data as well. It's to do with who the data controller is, or who is the inferred data controller, or who's the actual data controller, and what kind of processing is going on. So those questions, even in today's world, are hard nuts to crack, and they're often difficult questions because you end up with issues to do with joint controllers, scope of processing, third parties, fourth parties, data sharing, all these kinds of things. As we see today in cloud, medical, telecommunications, these things can raise problems very quickly, and they can lead to extended engagements between supervisory authorities and data controllers. So in a world of a metaverse that is, I think, beyond what the science fiction writers have dreamed up for us many years ago, in a world where we have a digital self or a digital human representation interacting with other digital humans, either in a contrived environment like a virtual shop or a virtual street, or maybe even in an AR world where things are even more alive and not so contrived and more risky, I think, as well, then I think the problems we have at the moment have the potential to become exacerbated in the future. And we've got to be very careful then about how we do that. So open standards, certification, proper protocols that are thought about, and these things are being developed already. APIs that people can use and are transparent to people and to organizations who want to use them, because you'll have SMEs working with platforms who provide metaverse environments in which they can reach customers or talk to their other suppliers on a business-to-business level. That world brings those problems that have to be mitigated in ways perhaps that Stefano has talked about, but also in other ways, I think. The risks with such a dynamic collection and volume and frequency of data collection, whereas personal data, in our case, are probably things that we have to think about for a long time before we actually do something big with them. We do need to think about these things. We don't want to end up in a world where, like with email, we end up with bandaged security solution to try and make things work properly, and end up with something that doesn't really work in the end. It's still useful, but it comes with risks and problems of its own. So all those things fit in there. Whether or not the current regulations deal with that, you can't really tell. What we have at the moment is GDPR in Europe, at least. We have e-privacy, which may also apply in these platforms as well, where there's interpersonal communication going on, and that has its own questions to do with confidentiality and retention and things like that. And sometimes those issues are far more endemic or systemic than the GDPR problems that have to be addressed in the first place. There are things to do with, privacy that aren't necessarily part of data protection, identity and verification and assurance that who you're talking to is actually who they are. Age verification, which comes up at the moment with kids' use of the internet, having technical systems that can provide some level of assurance and allow people to be sure that the person or object they're interacting with is, real and not bogus or fake, that there isn't an issue to do there with some hacker coming in pretending to be someone you think you know but actually isn't. And they're not dissimilar to problems we have at the moment. It's just going to happen at a different scale, I think, and potentially with greater, a more sinister level if we're interacting in a visual environment where we have avatars or potentially 3D representations, video representations of people's faces. So it is a bit doom and gloomy at the moment, but I think also as well we have to remember that there's a certain amount of hype about this at the moment. We've got to see how it evolves. There are basic technical issues to do with data transfer rates and volumes of data to be scaled up in a platform. I, for instance, have been doing some messing at home with generating 3D objects from photographs, and you end up with models of simple objects that are hundreds of megabytes. To try and upload those things to a metaverse, get them to interact at scale, to get them transferred from person to person, to allow them to be interacted with, all those technical questions have to be resolved first. Otherwise, we're going to end up in some kind of, CAD-based visualization with Lego men everywhere, which really isn't going to be attractive except to a very simple and small number of people. I think if we want the level of sophistications that are being dreamed about at the moment, then there's a good way to go. And in 10 and 15 years, legislation will probably change and will be introduced, because moving our personal lives into an online environment like this more and more will require regulation. So things like DSA, DGA, DMA, the AI Acts, the Data Acts, e-privacy, whenever it comes, they're all going to apply, but I think we'll see more as well. And there might be some more niche legislation to go with it. So hopefully that answers your question in some respect.
Thank you, Ultan. It certainly does. And very interesting again. And I have a question in the chat, maybe to all of you, which is also a little bit liaised with these concerns and the doom and gloomy, as Ultan has called it. And that is a question from somebody, of one of the participants, actually asking, are we concerned, or are you as panelists concerned, that people will actually spend less time in the physical world and more in a virtual world? We already see a trend that happening, people meeting less and less and talking less and less in person, and preferring technology to, like a brother and sister sitting next to each other in the bedroom, but they prefer to talk via WhatsApp than to step out of their bed and go to the other room. Is that something that you think we should embrace that? It is development, it is evolution, or is there also maybe a concern on your part? And maybe I start with both of the Stefan, you go ahead.
Thank you. I think it's really important that that we reflect on the wide range of regulatory challenges that come from the metaverse. And I suppose building on what Ultan was saying, it's clear that not all of the challenges relating to the metaverse are privacy related. And in actual fact, I'd say the privacy framework itself is in pretty good shape in terms of having the right tenets that we need to be thinking about, whether that's about transparency and consent, whether that's about how we minimize the collection of data beyond what is strictly necessary, how we limit the purpose of what the data is collected for and make sure that it's not used for other things. But the range of regulatory concerns that sort of relate to the metaverse will run much broader. So there's major questions in common with the regulation of the internet about online safety. And in the UK, one of our fellow regulators, Ofcom, is due to take on a new regime for regulating for online safety that will be very relevant in this space. There are questions around advertising and the regulation of the advertising that is put through any metaverse systems, of competition, and I was very interested to hear sort of the references to an interoperable metaverse, which both is important for enabling competition, but then also introduces kind of platform-based considerations as to who's got the infrastructure that runs the metaverse itself. So you have all of those things, and of course, as in the question just raised, the question of health, and actually how to promote health, and some of the much broader kind of social and equity considerations that we need to take into account. And I think the important point that I want to draw out here is it's not going to be one regulator's job to regulate the metaverse. And so actually it's going to be really important for different regulatory authorities to join up and to make sure that our approach to governance of the metaverse is integrated and harmonized. I'm really pleased to say that in the UK, we are working with a collection of regulators that we call the Digital Regulators Cooperation Forum, to introduce a symposium actually later this month on the governance of the metaverse, because I think individually we all recognize that it's not going to be a job for one of us alone. We need to think about how we get these choices right.
I might go over to the next item we had on our list to discuss, and that's actually going from the doom and gloomy to the economic opportunities. And I want to hand over the word to Jan, who's going to answer the question, what are the economic opportunities in the metaverse, and why does it matter that we are slowly moving into a metaverse? Jan?
Yeah, Nicole, thank you very much. Before maybe addressing that, I'm going to ruin your script a little bit, just because I want to add a little bit to what Ultan and Stefan said about the rules and so on. And that ties also into the economic opportunities. So one of the audience members asked a question about, hey, afraid that there will be less interaction physically with people and so on. And we respond with rules, and rules that need to be made, and rules that need to be created. On the other hand, and here is the comparison with the physical world and why physically interacting with the world, how that will translate to the metaverse, there could also be something like over-regulation of things. What are we allowed as individuals to do in the metaverse versus in the normal world? In the normal world, there are all kinds of rules that each and every one of us skips a little bit every day. Nicole, you and I, we both live in Amsterdam. For the people that don't know, cycling is one of our main modes of transportation here in the city, but it's also a national sport of us to then basically see all kinds of road regulation rules and particularly traffic lights. For instance, traffic lights, we see them as recommendations rather than something to adhere to when they turn to red. So we skip, we drive through red light all the time. And we each and every one of those, we speed maybe in the car a little bit. Each and every one of those, like, also not adheres to all the rules all the time. And we can do that in the physical world. But how will that be done in the metaverse, when basically if you are identified, and it's a really good question whether you need to be identified all of the time in the metaverse everywhere, or whether you can move around without being identified. But hey, everything can be logged in the end. So there's this interesting way of how that physical world will translate to a metaverse world, where you can you still skip rules a little bit? Are you still allowed to do that? Is there not? Will the rules allow for breaking the rules as well? And I think those are important questions to answer, rather than and it has slightly to do with privacy because of the identity factor, and it also has to do, of course, with other rules that you want there, and that also ties into the economic perspective of the metaverse. As I pointed out in the beginning, you can create shops in the metaverse. So we can that part of our e-commerce experience can be greatly enhanced. Also, other things that are now not possible can be created in the metaverse. I think you saw it in Stefano's introduction movie. You can go to a concert in the metaverse, and that opens up a whole new economy for entertainment, and our entertainment will be different. So those are the possibilities. I think that we will see a shift when the metaverse comes fully online and is fully deployed to things that will happen more online that now will happen offline. I mean, we are in this conference. This is an online conference in the metaverse that will look very, very different when it's there. It will also probably mean that we travel less to conferences. Can you still ask fees for attendance to conferences? What will it mean for a hotel business? What will it mean for airlines? And so on and so on. So there are economic chances in the metaverse by providing for what people or what businesses actually need. So platforms for conferences, entertainment, shopping, and those kinds of things. But you also will see a shift where we may want to do that less in a physical manner, in the real world, if you like, where you see a shift that, does it mean that our stores in our cities will become a different experience because you shop more in the metaverse than you shop offline? So I think all of that is tied together. Nicole, I know that we are here to speak about privacy and in the broader sense about what that means for in the future of the internet. But you can't escape the fact that all of these things will be more tied into each other, the economic aspects, the rules aspect, the privacy aspects, than it is currently, I guess, in the physical world, where not everything you do is indeed a data point, and not everything you do is indeed logged or seen or collected from it. So for me, the economic aspects, they are most certainly there, but they tie in to all of these other things that we have been discussing about the internet of the future here this morning.
Yeah, thank you, Jan. I just want to hear your opinion on one thing. Of course, in preparation of this conference and my role, I read a lot about the metaverse as well, and the selling of plots of digital land in the metaverse and the astronomical amounts which are asked for that. Do you have a thought about that? Because I found it quite, how do you say it? An opportunistic way of thinking about the metaverse. Very clever, the ones who are thinking about that. So what is your thought about that? About the sale of houses, of virtual homes, of maybe virtual transportation, and the likes? Any thought on that?
Yeah, of course. Of course, everything that happens offline will happen online. I'm quite sure of that. The good, the bad, the ugly. So where do you place this one? In the good, the bad, or the ugly? I don't know. We also pay prices for plots of land, very expensive plots of land if you are in inner cities like London, like Amsterdam, like Madrid, like what have you. So I'm not surprised by it, Nicole. I'm also not surprised by high prices. It will just be a different way of determining what the right price is. I must veer away a little bit without being able to explain all of it, maybe. But if you've heard of NFTs, so non-fungible tokens, so people are paying crazy amounts of money for something that is only digital, and only to say, I own the original of that, or in that. Well, it is what people find it's worth, right? So if you think that indeed that picture or the original picture of that cartoon is worth $3 million, and then the question is what actually is that? Then and you have it, then you pay for it, I guess. In the long run, I guess that with all those kinds of disruptions, you'll see that in the long run, my prediction is it will level out, and that we will pay for stuff, but we will pay what we find reasonable collectively. But yeah, that probably won't happen overnight, I guess. But I'm happy to hear what the others think about it.
Stefano, you raised your hand, so please add to with some comment.
Like, thank you. Like a couple of comments on this. I think I would really separate like the hype about what is happening in the moment when when a new technology is launched, and the long-term vision for this. And I would say like I would just start by think of today, think of the amount of jobs that exist today, think of the internet that we didn't think that could exist like just a few years ago. And I think that is the level of that is what is going to happen in the future with the metaverse. Is simply continue to basically create new opportunities, new job in ways that today we do not think it's possible. We cannot even probably imagine. And mostly like it has to do with creators. Like think of there are gonna be creators that will make like digital objects, like new, like as you said before, the possibility to go to a virtual like stadium to look at a football match in the metaverse. Like that's gonna be just like a new business that is gonna be developed around that. Think of the ability to actually build new business model in the same way as in the internet today. You have business model based on subscription, business model based on ads, like the same business, the same differences and the same variety of business model we're gonna see like in the metaverse. And maybe there's gonna be like new way to monetize services that we cannot simply just anticipate today. Think of like the work that companies and brands will actually do with the metaverse. What you expect to see happening is that the big brands, they were going to have like a physical presence and a digital presence. They're going to be selling stuff in the metaverse in the same way as they're going to be selling stuff in their brick and mortar shops. Like I think that this is really the economic opportunity basically bringing more choice to everybody, like creators, companies, every stakeholder. And that it's going to be up to us as a society to see how we take advantage of the opportunity. I think the opportunity is really there, and then to see how to take advantage of that. And if I may, I would just like to come back together with the opportunity to the question about how we use the metaverse and whether it's going to be something or like a space where we're going to spend more and more time hooked up to the internet or to a device. Then what I would like to say is that at least in my experience, it's not going to be necessarily that we will spend more time online, but I think we're going to have like a much better experience when we are online. So like really the idea is to say you do not need to spend more time online, but instead of having spending a lot of time staring at that screen of a phone, you're going to be having a much better and more immersive experience for that period of time. And I think that is, for me, one of the key messages.
Thank you, Stefano. I saw also Ultan raising his hand to comment.
It was just a quick point here. I think what we have to bear in mind as we talk about the evolution of the metaverse and where we think it's going to go, there's some choices to be made ethically and morally about what the platform is. Is it an open platform designed for all, open to everyone, without payment, for the public good, like the internet was originally supposed to be? Or is it a proprietary platform technology where you buy space for advertising, for a plot, to deliver services, to target customers, to profile them, and so on? I think at the moment, the vision is the latter rather than the former. And with that, that means that, I'm going to be busy for the rest of my life. So I look forward to it in some ways, but in other ways, I have trepidation as well. But beyond that, I think there are other considerations, and there are good ones. And I read a story today about people recording their COVID experience on video and minting NFTs so that they can't be erased, and they can record them both for posterity and for perhaps legal defense when things go wrong. There are novel applications of this, and there are novel combinations of these, Web3 technologies, finance products, insurance, advertising platforms, public authority usage, all these kinds of things that, are open to us in a wide vista. as well as the economic gain that's possible.
Thank you, Ultan. Considering the time left, we've got only 3 minutes to go, and I still have one question also left in the chat. I maybe want to first going to pose that question and then see whether we can still have time to wrap up comments. It was actually to you, Stefano, saying, how do you intend to build this open ecosystem, and what is the backbone that you consider? Over to you.
I think the answer to that, honestly, it's interoperability, in the sense that, like, the backbone, as I said before, like, there is a backbone related to the connectivity part of it, and that is, for instance, like an area where like Meta is investing a lot of money. Even really like building and financing submarine cables to bring connectivity to the region. That is part of, if you want, like the backbone of the connectivity experience, and that is critical for the success. So that is one thing. Then the other thing is that how do you build the experience that allows somebody to actually be virtually in a social network scenario where he's walking down the street and then he enters like a 3D stadium and he watches like a concert and he pays for a ticket, like all that backbone that is like, how do you make all the seamless experience? I think that will only come with interoperability and industry standards that today do not exist, and we need to start building them. I think that is the way of the future.
Okay, and to wrap it up, I think for today I've got a climate change concern here, and I'm curious to know your thoughts. It's apart from our data protection backgrounds or our privacy backgrounds, all other area, but a very interesting question. It's how are we going to handle the energy consumption? Running the platform and data search will require enormous amount of energy, and it might be detrimental for climate change. I know this is out of our comfort zones as privacy specialists, but just a brief couple of words to end this very interesting panel session from each and every one of you. Maybe. Can I start with Ultan?
Yeah, very quickly, there's a story in Ireland today that the data center electricity usage in this country exceeds domestic nighttime usage across the whole population. That's a big headline. Kind of brings it into perspective. There are lots of data centers here, as there are in other countries in Europe. But in terms of balance of rights, I think environmental rights will also have an impact on the way we use the metaverse and the way we think about it, just as much as digital data rights or freedom of speech.
Thank you, Ultan. Stefan, you already raised your hand, so over to you.
I'm going to make a link back to data protection and actually just talk about the principles around data minimization, purpose limitation, actually meaning that we should be creating a metaverse that only contains what it needs to do, that only uses the data that it needs to do, and hopefully that will help curb some of the consumption that comes around it.
Thank you, Stefan. Stefano, Jan, any last famous words for you?
I'm going to link it back a little bit. I'm going to link it back a little bit, Nicole, to the previous presentation on Moore's law. Look, as Stefano says, if the experience is not more online but better online, it will not create more data or data flows per se, but also if computers get still better and better and better, and I do believe in that, then at a certain point in time, I think this will level off. So there are concerns, but I'm also optimistic towards the future that we can handle those.
Okay, then the last word to Stefano.
I'll close this by saying that, look, today we're focused mostly on certain aspect of the metaverse, but I think we should not, if you look at the work that, for instance, a company like Meta is doing across metaverse, there are, public policies issue, environmental policy issue, safety, content moderation, content regulation. I mean, it just like today we look at like at a very narrow angle, if you want, like a very like specialized area of the discussion. But it's just the metaverse, like the internet, covers like a lot of policy topics, including like environmental sustainability, and that is definitely something that the company is looking at.
Thank you for that. And I want to give a warm thank you to all of you participating in this panel today. I find it very, very interesting. And I have a question for Ben when he opens the next session, and that is actually the question when the RAID conference will be first accessible in the metaverse. And with that question, I finish this session. Thank you all very, very much.